We are going to quickly walk through how to use the new RAT data status report, which breaks out results by instructional level, independent level, and scholars that have both their independent and instructional level. This report is school specific, so the first step is to actually pick your school. We're going to look at Endeavor Elementary for the purposes of this report. You can see first that in this graph, there's a snapshot of all cycles. So we can look across cycles and see, for the green, scholars who have both their independent and instructional level. So for instance, I can see for the BOY cycle, 11% of all scholars at this school had the independent and instructional levels. I can also see that a very small percentage had just the independent levels, and 6% of scholars had instructional levels. Finally, I can see that 81% of scholars were untested in the beginning of the year, which makes sense because I can also look at cycle 1 and see that all scholars were tested because there's no yellow color. And 96% of scholars at this school had their independent and instructional levels in cycle 1. However, I want to look more specifically at different grades because while this information is helpful, it's most helpful to look grade by grade because we know that some grades, especially in elementary school, are tested more than others. So this chart will help me look across a specific grade or a cohort of different grades and see how many scholars have independent and instructional levels, how many have independent only, how many have instructional only. Something really important to note is that this report does not show any scholars who have never been tested in the entire year. So if a scholar was tested in the beginning of the year, but not in cycle 1, they will show up on this report. However, if a scholar does not have any data in this RAT for any of these cycles, they won't appear in this report. So in order to make sure you've captured all scholars, we do suggest counting these numbers against your total enrollment, just to make sure you're not missing any scholars. If we want to get really specific and look at every scholar, we would first click on a grade if we want to zoom into one grade, and then we would click down here anywhere in the report to highlight one scholar. Then we're going to export this report. Going up here, click export and click crosstab. We're going to download it and then open it up. Now here's a report in an easier way to navigate. I'm going to hit the filter button. And again, this report will help me look and see if I have any gaps in assessment. So for instance, if I want to see scholars that have been tested in either cycle 2 or cycle 3, I can use these filters to see, okay, scholars that were tested. For instance, I can see a list of scholars who were tested in cycle 2, but not in cycle 3. And so this may help me figure out who I need to still test for cycle 3, or maybe for second grade, I don't need to test anyone, depending on, actually for second grade you would, but for if this was a third or fourth grade, you might not need to test these scholars in cycle 3 if they were already tested in cycle 2. Something else to note is we've put in the day of school and entry date, because sometimes a scholar may not have been tested for a certain cycle because they were a late admit. So we can see, for instance, that we have some scholars that were entered in September. So it wouldn't make sense for them, perhaps, to have a BOY entry if they started after August when all these scholars were tested in the beginning of the year.